Good morning, everybody. So today is March 29th. This is Zoology. I'm Mr. Sheridan. Today we have a guest lecturer. Anna Mosier is going to walk us through judging dairy cattle because she knows a whole lot more about it than I do. So she's going to give us some notes to have on the board. Make sure that you have those written down so that you can turn them in at the end of the week. And then in lieu of, since we aren't using lastnightjudging.com for today's class, she's going to use another resource. So I asked a question in Google Classroom. So you'll just need to place the cows in the first class that Anna gives us when we watch that video. And I'll share my screen in Zoom so that you can see that. And this whole thing will be recorded so that you can come back and watch that if necessary. So with that, Anna, thank you so much. And the floor is yours.
So when we're talking about dairy cattle, we talk about them in terms of heifers and cows, whether they've had calves or not. In this case, we're going to start with mature cattle, so animals that are between 2 years old and until they're done having calves. Some of the priorities I listed, and I put percentages. When we talk about dairy cattle, there's a scorecard that goes with them. And that gets broken down into terms of 100 points. So the udder is 40% of points, which seems pretty, I don't know, obvious in my mind, I guess. We're using these animals to get milk and make dairy products with. So if they don't have a large mammary system, if they don't have the capability of producing milk, then they're not worth anything to us. Dairy strength. That's just basically how feminine do they look, how clean cut, that's one of the terms I threw up there. Are they, their feet and legs is 20%. Obviously, if they can't get up and get to the parlor and eat hay and drink, then they're not going to be producing milk. And again, they become kind of useless to us. And then their frame is 15%. We like our cattle to be very straight across their top and just very angular and sharp. So then moving into some of these terms, I threw dairy and clean cut up there. That's just kind of how we describe animals. And the same spots that we would look for muscle and fat in beef cattle over their pins, through their brisket, their head and neck, down their thighs, the same areas that we look for there not to be fat, which kind of makes sense in dairy cattle. So we like to see their pin bone. We like to see them thin through their thigh, have this long, stretchy head and neck, very clean and sharp shouldered. So that's all that is just how little fat do they have, basically, is what that's saying. And then moving on to some of our udder terms that I threw up here. Their mammary system, that's just the technical term for their udder and their milk wells and milk veins, which are chambers that run down their body into their udder, which is how they get the milk into their udder. Their rear udder attachment.
And really quick, so milk wells and milk veins, could you expand on those a little bit more? Do we want milk veins? Do we want,
yes.
What does that look like? If you can share screen on there with Zoom, if you're going to show something,
okay,
which is great, just put that green button there, and then it'll share. Perfect.
So this, where this number 16 is pointing and where this number 17 is pointing, sort of, this kind of squiggly line here, that is a milk well. And that is how the blood flows. The milk well and the milk vein, they run parallel to each other. There's kind of number 15 that's kind of pointing towards more of the milk vein. And they run parallel to each other from their forerib down to their udder. And that's how blood circulates from their body into their udder. And that's how the milk is able to produce in their udder. So we want these to be very pronounced and very obvious when we see them. If they're, so we kind of want them to be sticking out of their body. When they're flat towards their body, that just means that they're not very, like, they're not there. So you can't run as much milk and as much blood through their body as you'd like. be circulating. So yeah, we definitely want those to be very visible and kind of sticking out in a way. So yeah, and then this number 17 here, if you can see that, that is where their foreudder attachment is, and number 29, that's their rear udder attachment. So going back over to our terms, their rear udder attachment and their foreudder attachment are very, very, very important. If they're not strong, if they're very weak, then their udder is going to be hanging lower than we want it to, and especially in young, very youthful cattle that have had their first calf, so around 2 years old or a milking yearling, we want their udder, it's rule of thumb that at all points in the cow's life, their udder should be above their hocks. So as much as we want to see a lot of udder when they're younger, a small udder is not bad, because that means that she can have 2 and 3 more calves without her udder getting too low to where it could potentially begin dragging on the ground or getting stepped on by other cows. So rule of thumb when you're looking at cattle is that you want their udders to be as high to their body as possible most of the time. And that is why the rear udder and foreudder attachment are so important, is because that's how they are attached to their bodies. That's how you keep them up higher. So the rear udder attachment, we like them to be very high, very close to their vulva. We like them to be very wide, because when they're wide, rear udder attachments, that means they're wide between their pins. That means they have a wide rear udder, so they can not only produce more milk, but when they're wide in their pins, it's easier for them to calve. And they are going to be calving 3 and 4 times in their lifetime. So the terms we use to describe those are high and wide. And then the foreudder attachments, that's again just the front where the udder meets the body of the cattle, of the cows. And we use the terms long and smooth to describe that. We like them to blend very smoothly from their body to their udder when they kind of cup up and almost make like a little circle. So if this is, so if we're looking at like leg, body, if it kind of cups and it's not very smooth and it cuts into their body, then it's going to begin hanging a lot lower, a lot quicker than we would like. But when it's real smooth and kind of blends in, it'll stay higher longer. Again, is really what we're looking for. And with their median suspensory ligament, this is the very technical term for a crease or a seam, and that's where the 2 udders, or the 2 sides to the udders, are divided. So we have 4 quarters in an udder. There's the left and right side, and then the front and rear. So we have the median suspensory ligament running along their udder, dividing them in the middle between their left and the right sides of their udder. And this again is very important when in terms of keeping their udder high above their hocks. Terms we use to describe this is we just want this to be very pronounced. We don't want their udder to be smooth. We want to be able to see their median suspensory ligament. We want to be able to see the 2 rear quarters divided. So this is pretty key when you're looking at an udder, is how strong is their median suspensory ligament. Again, we typically call this a crease or a seam. And then teat placement. This is important in terms of when you're going to milk a cow. When their teats are crossed or when they're really spread out, it becomes hard to put a milker on them. And with how common robotic milkers are becoming in the industry, teat placement has become more and more important when judging dairy cattle, because you don't have someone there to manually change where the teat cups are going on. So when the robotic claw goes up, it needs to be able to locate the teats very easily. So we want these to be very square beneath the udder, and we need space between them. We don't want them touching, but we also don't want them pointing out away from each other. Yeah.
Does teat size, either length or width, does that factor in at all?
It does. It's not as important as the actual placement of it, but yeah, we like them to be relatively small. We don't want to see like goat-sized teats on these cattle. But teat placement is more where we're looking at. And then in terms of how we break up classes, when we're judging, obviously there's only 4 in the class, but what's different than with the goat or the swine and the beef cattle is that dairy cattle do not cross their breeds. So each breed is shown in a different show in a different class. So classes are broken up by age and then by breed. So from spring calves to mature production cows, they will all be around the same age and they will all be the same breed. The only time where this isn't true is in the term of the black and white and red and white Holstein. They still have separate shows, but red and whites can show in black and white shows, but black and whites cannot show in red and white shows. Just kind of a weird thing. So there's, I'm gonna call it 6.5 breeds when we're talking about dairy cattle because of that red and white and black and white Holstein. So there's Ayrshires, Guernseys, Holsteins, Jerseys, milking shorthorns, and red and whites. And you're looking at pretty much the same thing across breeds. The only time where it gets a little tricky is with brown Swiss because they're the closest dairy cattle to a beef cattle that there is. So you don't really see them being as refined and clean cut around their pins, and they normally just carry a little more weight, but they're also the largest breed in the species. So that's kind of how that counts.
You said that was brown Swiss.
Brown Swiss. And then there's just little things structurally between all the breeds that are a little different. But again, you're looking for pretty much the same thing, especially in terms of the udder. That's 40% of your scorecard. So our little saying is when in doubt, udder out. So if you don't know what to look for, if you don't know what you're looking at, just look at the udders and place them that way. So that's kind of all I have today. Okay. So this is a class from World Dairy Expo in 2015. World Dairy Expo is like the show in the dairy industry. They have a judging contest that goes with it. So to me, this was a pretty logical class. Let's see.
chuckling because I have absolutely no idea. I'm so excited to hear your reasons here. But yeah, no, does it make sense to do the same thing we always do? What did everybody do first?
Oh, I would put the others because that's 40%.
That's a great point. What did you like or not like about the others?
Do you want us to put our answers?
Oh, great idea. Yeah, let's answer that question in Google Classroom for everybody. You should you're literally gonna write down 4 numbers. 2, 3, 4, 1, whatever you did.
Okay. So in this class,
Okay, let's
Should
get
we
some
see the
opinions from the
discussion?
class.
Okay,
Let's see
yeah.
what everybody did first. All right, does anybody need more time to answer that question? All right, then what did you do? Damien, you started talking about looking at others. What did you like or not like about another?
1 and 2 seem to have the biggest, and 1 it looks like they're more straight. But she said not you don't want to put them out.
The T placement you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, great. Anybody in the front row? What did you all do? Some of you have been on jury judging teams before. Devin, what did you do first?
I don't like the way the video is set up, man. I had like 3.
You did or you did not?
Did not.
Agreed. I did
It
not
was
like.
very like.
I did not like
bulgy and
3
before
either.
udder. I couldn't see this view the first time.
That was the first thing I did was found 3 and sorted her down. I thought that her 4 udder, I'm trying to use Anne's term, her 4 udder attachment and rear udder attachment were both not great. Yeah. Are we right or wrong?
no.
Great. Okay, good.
So it's hard to see on some of these black animals because their forudder or their rear udder attachment here does kind of start to blend in a bit. Oh, that's but in terms of how high it is above her hock here, really, I mean, it is attached pretty well. She does kind of give you a weird look in her forudder attachment from times. It's not super long is the term I would say, but that's pretty smooth. That's a smooth forudder attachment. It's just not as long as maybe 2's. But in this class, you have to find 2 and place her first. There's an 8-point cut at the top. That's how important it is to get 2 in first place. So this is the official. And I will say when I showed my dad this class last night, we both placed our bottom pair different. 1 is just a lot more feminine. She's a lot more dairy than 4. 4 is a little coarse, especially down her thigh. She kind of looks like she's maybe carrying a little weight there down her thigh. Then 2, who is a very sharp, very angular cow. But 1's got maybe a little too much set to her hock, kind of gets her tail head up there, isn't really full through her front end, 1. She's not very full through her front end, but she's a very sharp, very dairy animal. So you do kind of have to note that with her. But 2 is just the all-around balanced animal. She's very level across her top. She's clean cut, but she's not kind of choppy looking like number one. She's angular, but she doesn't really blend from her shoulder back down into her body and from her barrel into her thurl and her hip.
What's her thurl?
Her thurl is this joint right here. You can see it really well here. Yep. Between her hips and her pins, and that's going to indicate how much set they have to their hock, as well as their pin placement. Which, like I said, we want a lot of width between their pins, but we also need animals to be very level from their hips to their pins, like 2 here, just for calving ease. When their thurl gets high, their pins get high, and then it kind of gives them this reverse tilt, and it's going to be very hard for them to calve. But I do get what you're saying, because when I first looked at this class, I wasn't a big fan of 2, or of 3, I'm sorry. But really, that forudder, if it's one thing, it's short, it's not very long, which makes it look like it doesn't blend very well. But I mean, that's a pretty smooth forudder.
Okay, can you talk about her just a little bit more? Because I know I missed her. What do we like about 3 over 4? And,
they have reasons, and then there's recorded reasons as well.
Great.
So 3 over 4, they talked about her advantage in her feet and legs. She tracks a little smoother. You know, you do have to know 4 has this puffy knee right here. It's a little swollen, so she kind of gets a little wonky when she's moving, doesn't really track the straightest. And then they talked about, like I was using the term coarse. 4 is kind of coarse. She's almost a little heavy, and 3 is just a more angular, dairy-looking animal. So they talked about her openness to her rib. She's got a little more rib than 4. But we can also listen to
My name is Rachel Eckel. I'm from Michigan 4-H, and I will be giving reasons on the Holstein Junior 2-year-old cows. 2, 3, 4, 1 is my placing for this class of Holstein Junior 2-year-old cows.
And this here, when you're looking at 1, it's kind of hard to see. She's got this spot in her back, and they're all kind of stacked up. You can see she kind of breaks in her loin and dips down in her back. And so as important as the udder is, and I will grant, you know, she's got a nice udder on her, but the rest of her is just not that great.
Sure. Yep. Great. Your bag's in house.
I begin this class with the best uddered and most stylish cow in 2 over 3 in my top pair. 2 carries her udder higher above the hock with a longer, smoother blending fore-udder attachment, is more balanced between her forequarters, has a higher rear udder attachment, a wider rear udder, and more bloom and a milkier texture throughout her mammary system. To continue, 2 is taller at the point of withers, stronger through her loin and chine, has a more uphill run, is fuller in her crops, has more width and depth through her heart, has more depth and spring of rib, and carries more width through her hips, thurls, and pins. I concede that 3 has a stronger median suspensory ligament. 3's size and scale place her over 4 in my middle pair. 3 is taller at the point of withers, longer and stretchier from end to end, fuller in her crop, wider and deeper in her heart, fuller.
Where's her crop?
So it's like the point of like right at the top of her chine. Okay. Basically, it's just dropped down a little bit.
I got it.
It's just where we kind of, so their withers is where we measure them, and then this, I don't know. I don't like the term width between the, it doesn't really mean anything. Just means she's a little wider throughout. That's all that term means. And then heart girth, we've heard that a couple times. Again, it's just a term for being fuller through their forerib is really all it means. Having width through their forerib is pretty much all that means.
And smooth blending over her shoulder, has more depth and spring of rib, carries more width through her hips, thurls, and pins, and is more nearly level from hips to pins. Moreover, 3 has a wider rear udder and has teats that are placed more centrally on their quarters and hang more perpendicular with the ground. I recognize that 4 is more balanced between her forequarters and has a longer, smoother forudder attachment. And it is these advantages in mammary system, combined with correctness of frame, that places 4 over 1 in my bottom pair. 4 carries her udder higher above the hock, has a higher rear udder attachment, and has a stronger, more welded on forudder attachment that blends more smoothly into the body wall. 4 is also more balanced between her rear quarters. In addition, 4 is stronger through her loin and chine, has a more uphill run, is wider and deeper in her heart, has more sweep of rib, and carries more width through her hips, thurls, and pins. I recognize that one is deeper in her rear rib. However, she is too loose and imbalanced in her mammary system to merit a higher placing in this class. These reasons justify my placing of 2, 3, 4, 1 for this class of Holstein junior 2-year-old cows.
Before you get off of this page, can you go back to that, just that rear view looking in, and just use your cursor and point to where you would consider their rear udder attachment on each one of those cows?
So her rear udder attachment starts like down here.
Okay, great.
2's probably starts more up here.
Okay,
3's is about right here.
great.
And 4's I would say is like right here.
Okay.
So yeah, and I was gonna go back to the video for a minute, see for walk, because when she was talking about being loose and her attachments, there's a couple shots of her walking where you do see her udders start to sway quite a bit.
Okay.
Which if their udders very attached like hers, it stays pretty still as she's walking. I need one. And with hers, it's kind of bouncing around a little more, and it's that's a loose attached udder. When it's swaying around like that, when you see it move a lot, this is probably a better view of their rear udders, but her rear udder attachment doesn't start until about right here.
Okay.
And then it's, the closest to her hock of all 4 of them. So in another calving or 2, that's going to be getting very low, and you risk other cows stepping on it and getting to a point where it might even be hitting the ground. Probably not on a cow that tall, but yeah.
Very cool. Do you have another class today or no?
Yes, I can. So these ones are brown Swisses. So like I said, they tend to carry just a little more weight on them than a Holstein or a Jersey. So you kind of got to look past that at parts. They carry a lot of flesh through their neck, head and neck, but we're still looking for a very dairy, clean cut animal. But you just kind of have to grant that on a couple of them, that maybe they're going to be carrying a little more weight through their thigh. Yeah, Henry.
I was just stretching.
Oh. So, I'm going to point out that none of these rear udder attachments are very wide. So in that case, look more at their actual rear udder. They're all milked out, so it's kind of hard to tell. But really in this class, she's probably got your worst attachments and is the most uneven between her quarters. She's a lot lighter in her right rear quarter and gives this kind of lopsided kind of view to her udder, where all the other three are a little more balanced. You kind of get to see that one here and three again, but again, you're looking at them milked out, so it's kind of hard to tell at times. This is kind of what I was getting at with the more circular kind of forudder attachment. It's very choppy and it kind of makes this almost little triangle kind of point here between her lowest part of her rib and her forudder attachment.
So we're saying that in this particular animal, or that's a brown Swiss thing?
In this particular animal,
Yeah.
This is a very poor forudder attachment.
Good deal.
This is probably a better view of all of their forudders. But again, you kind of have to note that 4 and 2 are just really choppy, don't blend very well.
Okay, so we don't have a place for us to record our placing here, but what did you find? What's the first thing you did? Anybody? Rihanna?
Either was it 3 or 1? That's my top pair.
Found the pairs, okay, I like that. Did anybody else find those pairs, put 3 and 1 on top? Did anybody find one of those pairs relatively easier to sort? Did anybody like one over the other? Jeremiah, what'd you do?
I put 3 at the top right now.
Anybody else put 3 at the top and found her pretty quickly? At least I did. I don't know if it's right or not, but that's cool. Okay. Anna, go ahead.
The official is 3142. I think this 6-point cut at the bottom is a little harsh. I think 4-2 really, I mean, neither one of them were real great animals. But yeah, you had to find 3 as the best uddered animal in the class. She got out and moved the best and was just the most airy in the class. So we can listen to
Hi, my name is Ben Powers and I am from Wisconsin, and I will be giving you the Brown Swiss Senior 2-year-old cow's reasons. 1342 is how I place this class of Brown Swiss Senior 2-year-old cows. 1 leads out the class today using her decided badge of bloom capacity to merit the blue ribbon. She is more symmetry, balance, and quality throughout all four quarters. Wearing her udder higher above the hocks is wider in her rear udder attachment, being fuller at the top of the rear quarters, having a stronger udder cleft, carrying that udder cleft all the way up to the top of the rear quarters, and a longer, smoother blending forward that attacks more tightly in the body wall, with more variation all the way throughout. In addition, she has a more massive cow, being wider through the chest floor and carries that width on back to her hooks, pins, and throws, with more depth, openness, spring, and speed to both the fore and rear rib. In addition, the light colored cow is more nearly level from hooks and pins, having a tail head that sits more neatly in between her pins, noting the high-tailed head setting on 3. I do grant that 3 is a more dairy cow, and she uses that definite advantage of dairiness to help her go over 3, to help her go over 4, and my much easier middle placing. She is more extended about the head, longer and leaner in her neck, sharper at the point of withers, more sharply chiseled on her top, has less passion for hooks, pins, and throws, and is more curved in her thigh. Furthermore, she has more bloom to her udder, wearing her udder higher above the hocks, having a stronger definition of the seam, and has more adequate curve at the top of the rear quarters. To tip the scales even further, the cow with the white switch is a cleaner bone cow, having a more correct set to the hock, and stepping down in a stronger pattern, complemented by a shorter toe and a deeper heel, while also tracking straighter on her rear feet and legs as I view her from the rear. Although I do see that she has a slight puffy left hock. On the other hand, 4 does have a longer, smoother blending forwarder, and she uses that definite advantage of quality to rudder to help her take her over to my bottom placing. She has more symmetry and balance throughout all 4 quarters, wearing her udder higher above the hocks, is wider in her rear udder attachment, and has more variation all the way throughout with a longer, smoother blending fore udder attachment. Furthermore, she has more depth and openness to both the fore and rear rib, while also having so much more.
Okay, so basically he's saying 4 is a much wider, stronger built animal than 2. So he did flip his top pair, and it's understandable. 1 is there's a lot more to her. And like I pointed out earlier, 3 is maybe a little lopsided in her rear quarters. I think maybe he got a little too hung up on that place or second. But when comparing them, like I said, Brown Swisses are the largest breed in the dairy industry, and typically do have a lot more build. So you kind of do have to take their frame and give them a few more points on that. But he placed them 1 over 3 just on size and depth to her rib mainly. 3 is a little narrow. You can kind of see it in here. She's not as wide as 1 or even 4, but so that's why he did that. Yeah.
What did he say? What did he mean when he said she has more bloom to her udder?
So that just means, so like when you're looking at them, kind of from it's just capacity mainly. But you use bloom to describe their rear udder. And when you're looking at them on their profile, if you can kind of like see their udder past their leg, that's usually a good thing. So that's what bloom is.
Can you describe what you see in the structure issues at number 2?
Of number 2, so the biggest structure issue is her dopey rump from her hooks to her pins. She's got this downhill run from her hooks to her pins. And while that's better than an uphill run, like we kind of see here in 1, it's just, we would like them to be level, more like 4 and 3. But this is really a good class to look at in terms of levelness of their rump. You have 2 very level animals in 4 and 3. And then you have this kind of uphill run from her hips to her pins in 1, which like I said, that's gonna cause calving issues. And then 2 has just the opposite. And it's just not very feminine looking is the big thing. It's not pretty. We don't like to look at it. So that's mainly the big thing. There's nothing really wrong with it. She's not gonna have calving issues. Her biggest issue is though she has no width between her pins. So she's not gonna be able to push calf out. She's the narrowest animal in the class. You can kind of see that too. She kind of starts hocking here when she's standing.
So your issues with her aren't necessarily structurally, it's just the fact that she's narrow and
she's narrow.
So
So she's not gonna be able to push on calf. But yeah.
What score did he get on her feet?
I don't know. Well, he put this top pair. He got a 49 on his reasons. He got 46 on his reasons and a 49 on his reasons.
All right. Have an awesome day, everybody. See you back here tomorrow. Probably we're doing career readiness tomorrow. So we'll be away from livestock judging for a day tomorrow. See you later. Great job, man. You too, Karen.